I personally even experienced watching public I was only 11 around. Hundreds of crowd people gathered, but specifically told all children come out, sit at the front of the crowd.
Every single day in North Korea, countless unseen tragedies unfold behind closed doors. These stories of suffering, fear, and control remained hidden from the rest of the world until very recently. And they are so harrowing that they seem almost unimaginable. In a country where silence is enforced by iron fists and human rights are crushed beneath relentless oppression, the lives of ordinary citizens are shaped by an unyielding regime that punishes not just individuals, but entire families, enforces ruthless propaganda, and orchestrates a world where freedom is a distant, forbidden dream. This is what happens in North Korea every single day, hidden from the world, yet brutally persistent. Let's start. Number 15. Punished for 3 generations. In North Korea, punishment is not just an individual sentence, it can trap entire families for generations. The regime's policy of guilt by association means that when someone is accused of a political crime or even minor dissent, the repercussions ripple far beyond the individual. Parents, children, and grandchildren can all face punishment. This brutal practice, known as 3 generations of punishment, is designed to crush any thoughts of rebellion before they even surface. By targeting families, the regime instills a pervasive sense of terror and loyalty. If your actions, or even the perceived actions of your relatives, are deemed hostile, everyone connected to you is marked guilty, regardless of their actual involvement. Entire families are sent to remote prison camps, known as kwanliso, where conditions are among the harshest on earth. Reports from defectors reveal unimaginable hardships in these camps: forced labor, starvation, torture, and the near-constant threat of death. Children born in these camps often grow up knowing only misery and deprivation. This policy isolates dissidents by cutting them off from any support network and deters others from considering opposition, knowing that their loved ones could suffer as a consequence. It also reinforces the absolute power of the ruling elite, who demand unquestioning obedience under threat of collective punishment. What makes this practice particularly harrowing is how it traps innocent people in a web of inherited guilt, stripping away any hope of justice or redemption. Entire bloodlines can be erased from society, condemned not for their deeds but for their family ties. This generational punishment reflects the oppressive grip the North Korean regime maintains over its population. It's a stark reminder of the human cost behind the regime's iron-fisted rule, one that condemns the innocent alongside the accused. Shocking, right? Well, we're just getting started. Number 14. Public trials. In 2011, a haunting spectacle unfolded in Suji, North Korea, offering the outside world a rare and disturbing glimpse into the state's authoritarian machinery. A public trial was staged in front of hundreds, perhaps thousands of onlookers, aimed not at violent criminals or political enemies, but at ordinary citizens. Their crime? Consuming South Korean media. These individuals, 9 in total, stood accused of watching dramas and listening to pop music smuggled in from the South. In any other part of the world, this would be seen as harmless, even mundane, but in North Korea is framed as ideological sabotage. The regime labels such behavior as a threat to its socialist purity. The footage, later leaked and circulated internationally, shows a state judge declaring with unwavering severity that the accused were arrested for what he called grave offenses. This was not merely a judicial proceeding, it was political theater, weaponized for mass indoctrination. The trial was held publicly to drive home the consequences of disobedience. The spectators, forced to attend, were made witnesses to the raw power of the state. By punishing individuals in the public eye, the regime sent a clear message. Cultural curiosity, or ideological drift, would not be tolerated. Any contact with foreign ideas, especially those from its southern neighbor, was tantamount to treason. Even in the absence of an official verdict on camera, it is almost certain that the accused faced long prison sentences in North Korea's notorious labor camps, or worse. The regime is clearly so paranoid of influence, so terrified of cultural erosion, that it punishes even the faintest echoes of freedom. Number 13. A fake city. There are no limits to how far North Korea can go to impress, deceive, and project an image of prosperity to the rest of the world. For example, Wonsan City, a sprawling mock-up built along the coast, complete with towering apartment blocks, gleaming office buildings, and wide boulevards, may seem completely normal from afar. Yet, behind the polished exterior, these structures often stand empty, devoid of residence or daily life. The purpose of this fake city and others like it is multi-layered. Domestically, they serve as propaganda tools, reinforcing the narrative that North Korea is developing and modernizing rapidly. They bolster the image of the regime as visionary and capable, creating a sense of national pride among citizens who see these gleaming constructions broadcast on state media. Internationally, these ghost cities are intended to bewilder and impress foreign visitors and diplomats, projecting an illusion of stability and growth despite widespread reports of poverty and deprivation. These ghost cities also play a psychological role. They exemplify the regime's control over reality itself, crafting physical spaces that represent not what is, but what the leadership wants the world and its own people to believe exists. By building these elaborate illusions, the regime attempts to mask the economic hardships, food shortages, and infrastructure decay that define much of North Korean life. Moreover, the fake cities are often used as backdrops for carefully staged events, parades, and photo opportunities that further reinforce the regime's carefully curated image. But wait, there's more from where that came. Number 12. Defection gone wrong. In November 2017, the world was gripped by footage that captured one of the most audacious and dramatic defections from North Korea in recent memory. The man at the center of it all was Oh Chong-song, a 25-year-old North Korean border guard stationed near the Joint Security Area, one of the most tightly monitored and militarized stretches on Earth. What began as just another day at the DMZ turned into a heart-pounding sprint for freedom that peeled back the curtain on the brutal, dehumanizing conditions within the Hermit Kingdom and the terrifying risks involved in fleeing it. Oh Chong-song was no ordinary defector. Unlike many who cross borders by night or through treacherous mountain routes into China, he made his escape in broad daylight, in full view of surveillance cameras and heavily armed North Korean troops. Driving a military vehicle at high speed, he smashed through checkpoints before ditching the vehicle near the border and making a desperate dash across the line. North Korean guards opened fire immediately, discharging over 40 rounds, 5 of which struck Oh Chong-song as he fled. It was nothing short of a miracle that South Korean soldiers managed to drag his motionless body to safety before he bled out. His survival, however, revealed more than just physical resilience. During emergency surgery at a hospital in South Korea, doctors discovered something shocking. Oh Chong-song's intestines were riddled with giant parasitic worms, some exceeding 11 inches in length. This grim detail laid bare the horrifying public health conditions inside North Korea, where access to proper nutrition and medical care is staggeringly poor, even among the military elite. But what truly set Oh Chong-song's story apart was his background. He was the son of a high-ranking military official, a major general, and had enjoyed a relatively privileged status in North Korean society. He was not starving in a rural province or facing persecution for dissent. Instead, he fled because he was deeply anxious about the possibility of war between North Korea and the United States, especially given the rising tensions and fiery rhetoric exchanged in 2017. He felt that war was inevitable. Rather than be drafted into what he believed would be a catastrophic confrontation, he chose to defect, despite the nearly certain risk of death. Number 11. Female traffic officers. In North Korea, even the simplest public roles are carefully orchestrated to serve the regime's broader goals of control, discipline, and image management. The sight of female traffic officers directing vehicles on the streets might seem like a mundane aspect of daily life, but within this context, it carries deeper significance. These women are not only enforcing traffic laws, they are part of a highly visible propaganda effort aimed at showcasing order, discipline, and the regime's claim to modernity. Yet, behind the uniform and disciplined gestures lies a strict system of control and expectation. These female officers operate under intense surveillance, with their every move closely monitored. Their role is far from simply managing traffic. They are representatives of the state's ideology. The regime carefully choreographs their appearances, uniforms, and demeanor to reflect an idealized vision of the perfect citizen, disciplined, obedient, and visibly aligned with the regime's goals. Moreover, the presence of women in such roles challenges traditional gender roles to a degree, signaling a form of progressiveness. Yet this empowerment is tightly controlled and leveraged to reinforce loyalty rather than genuine equality. Female officers become symbols of the regime's claim to gender inclusivity, even while broader societal freedoms remain severely restricted. Their work also acts as a subtle form of social control, as the disciplined presence of women in uniform helps maintain order in public spaces, discouraging dissent or disorder. This is yet another example of how the North Korean state uses even everyday functions to project power, control its population, and perpetuate the myth of a stable, orderly society. Speaking of myth, you're not going to believe this next one. Number 10. Kim Il-sung's funeral. The death of Kim Il-sung in July 1994 marked a seismic moment in North Korea's history. As the founder of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and its undisputed leader for nearly 5 decades, Kim had not only built a regime, but also cultivated a mythology around himself so potent that many North Koreans were psychologically unprepared to imagine life without him. In a nation so sealed off from the rest of the world, where citizens are inundated from birth, with state-crafted narratives of loyalty, sacrifice, and ideological purity, the news of his death landed like an existential blow. The funeral proceedings were nothing short of monumental, not just in size, but in symbolism. Over 10 days, the country came to a complete standstill. Trains halted, markets shuttered, television stations replaced all programming with round-the-clock tributes. More than 2 million people gathered to mourn, and millions more took to the streets, their cries of anguish reverberating through every village and city. State media broadcast continuous footage of civilians sobbing uncontrollably, collapsing to their knees, clutching portraits of Kim Il-sung to their chests, as if holding on to a father figure or a divine being. While some of this mourning was undoubtedly genuine, especially from those who had only ever known Kim as their guiding light, it was also laced with fear. In a country where disloyalty, or even insufficient enthusiasm, can result in imprisonment or death, grieving becomes a performative duty. What made the funeral even more revealing was its near-total absence of international presence. No foreign leaders were invited, no diplomatic tributes from the outside world were accepted. This was by design. North Korea's decades-long isolationism didn't waver, even in the face of death. The state made clear that this was not a moment for external recognition, but a deeply internal event, a solemn rite of passage designed to reinforce national unity and ideological continuity. In the eyes of the regime, Kim Il-sung had not died. He had transitioned into eternity, enshrined as the Eternal President, a title that would prevent the possibility of any successor outshining him. Number 9. Starving children. In the shadowy corners of North Korea, where cameras are rarely allowed and voices are silenced before they can cry for help, a haunting scene unfolded in Haeju City, captured by rare, smuggled footage that showed the raw, unfiltered suffering of the country's most defenseless, orphaned children. In a state-run facility, thin limbs and hollow eyes told a story far louder than words ever could. Dozens of children, skeletal from hunger, sat listless and expressionless, their young bodies failing under the weight of chronic malnutrition and illness. These are not scenes from a distant past or a famine-ridden century. This is the 21st century, and yet here, time appears to have stood still. North Korea's agricultural collapse is not solely a result of poor weather or sanctions, but a direct consequence of government priorities that have, for decades, placed weapons and image above human survival. Fields go untended, farming equipment rusts in disrepair, and food distribution is reserved largely for military zones and politically loyal communities. The country's military-first policy, a cornerstone of Kim Jong-un's governance, has gutted the civilian infrastructure needed to support basic human needs. The children in this Haeju orphanage represent a painful microcosm of a much larger humanitarian tragedy. Medical supplies are virtually non-existent. Basic treatments for diarrhea, fever, or respiratory infections, illnesses made deadly by prolonged hunger, are nowhere to be found. Even when food is available, it often lacks the vital nutrients required for healthy development. Many children suffer from stunted growth, impaired cognitive function, and weakened immune systems, all of which are irreversible without early intervention, something these orphans are heartbreakingly unlikely to receive. Perhaps most enraging is the obscene contrast between their suffering and the indulgences of the regime's elite. While state-run orphanages struggle to provide even one meal a day, Kim Jong-un is reported to spend millions of dollars annually on imported delicacies, fine cheeses, caviar, expensive wines, and other luxuries sourced from Europe and Asia. Number 8. Otto Warmbier. In January 2016, Otto Warmbier, an affable, bright, and promising 21-year-old student from the University of Virginia, embarked on what was supposed to be an unconventional winter adventure. A brief, tightly guided tour of North Korea. Organized through a China-based company called Young Pioneer Tours, the trip took Otto to Pyongyang just before the new year. For the most part, it followed the script typical of such excursions: monument visits, state-approved cultural stops, and highly curated interactions with locals. But as the group prepared to depart on January 2nd, Otto was abruptly pulled aside at the airport and arrested by North Korean authorities. The charge, allegedly attempting to steal a propaganda banner from a restricted area in his hotel. What followed was a grim descent into the machinery of North Korean justice. Otto was subjected to a brief show trial before a visibly unsympathetic tribunal, where he was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for what was described as a hostile act against the state. For more than a year, Otto disappeared from the public eye. The North Korean regime offered little information about his condition, and repeated efforts by U.S. officials to secure his release were stonewalled. Then, in June 2017, after 17 months of silence, Pyongyang suddenly agreed to release him on humanitarian grounds. What awaited his family in Cincinnati, however, was devastating. Otto was in a vegetative state, unresponsive, with severe brain damage. Medical professionals in the U.S. who examined him concluded that he had suffered extensive loss of brain tissue, consistent with prolonged oxygen deprivation. North Korea claimed he had contracted botulism and slipped into a coma after taking a sleeping pill. This assertion is widely rejected by medical experts. Otto died 6 days after returning home, surrounded by family, never regaining consciousness. His death ignited global outrage and intensified scrutiny of North Korea's human rights abuses. In the United States, it led to renewed calls for a reassessment of how the nation handles diplomatic relations with rogue regimes and how it protects citizens abroad. Number 7. Weird army drills. Under the rigid gaze of Kim Jong-un and the blaring horns of nationalist music, North Korean soldiers put on a surreal and brutal performance, one that looks more like a martial arts circus than a serious military drill. In choreographed sequences meant for broadcast both at home and abroad, troops bash bricks with their foreheads, lie shirtless as sledgehammers strike slabs of stone placed on their chests, and crash headlong into walls of glass with no protection. These aren't standard exercises in combat readiness. They are ritualized demonstrations of loyalty and resilience, twisted into propaganda to glorify the regime and idolize its leader. To an outside observer, these stunts might appear absurd or exaggerated, but in North Korea, they serve a calculated purpose. They are meant to convey an image of physical invincibility, mental discipline, and blind obedience. Every move is rehearsed, every shout synchronized, every drop of sweat a statement. We are strong, we feel no pain, we obey without question. But behind this spectacle lies a grimmer reality. Military service in North Korea is not a choice. It is an obligation, a rite of passage that begins in adolescence and often swallows entire decades of a person's life. Men are typically conscripted for 10 years, women for around 7, although terms can vary depending on political loyalty and background. During this time, soldiers are not just trained in warfare, but molded into instruments of the regime's ideology. Indoctrination is constant, personal freedoms are non-existent, and physical hardship is extreme. Conditions in many military barracks are notoriously harsh. Recruits endure starvation-level rations, inadequate shelter during freezing winters, and relentless physical punishment disguised as discipline. These outlandish drills, like enduring beatings with wooden staffs or smashing bricks with fists, aren't just for show. They reflect a deeper culture of suffering equated with patriotism. Injury, even death, during such training is not uncommon, but seldom reported. Despite boasting one of the largest standing armies in the world, North Korea's military lags far behind its rivals in technology and resources. While modern warfare increasingly relies on cyber capabilities, drones, and precision-guided munitions, Pyongyang leans heavily on human spectacle to compensate. Moreover, these demonstrations are deeply embedded in North Korea's culture of hero worship. Kim Jong-un often attends these events in person, surrounded by clapping generals and military brass. Every soldier who breaks a stone or bleeds on stage does so not only for the honor of the country, but for the glorification of the supreme leader. What the outside world sees as strange or even laughable is, within North Korea, a deadly serious expression of loyalty, discipline, and sacrifice. These drills are not meant to make sense in a strategic or tactical context. They are psychological warfare, aimed as much at the hearts of North Koreans as the eyes of the world. They are yet another piece of the regime's propaganda. Number 6. Fugitive captured. In 2021, a shocking prison break unfolded in China that not only captured headlines, but also reignited global discussions about North Korea's stranglehold on its citizens. The man at the center of this high-stakes manhunt was no ordinary fugitive. He was a 39-year-old North Korean escapee whose entire life had been shaped by desperate attempts to flee a country that, for many, functions as an open-air prison. Originally defecting to China in 2013, this man lived a secret life marked by petty crime, such as stealing food, clothes, phones, and cash from rural Chinese homes. For many North Korean defectors, hiding in China is itself a dangerous gamble. China does not recognize North Korean refugees as asylum seekers. Instead, It treats them as illegal economic migrants and routinely deports them back. In 2014, Chinese authorities arrested him for a string of crimes that included burglary and illegal entry. He was handed a lengthy sentence in a high-security prison in northeast China. Facing only 2 more years before his release and inevitable deportation to North Korea, he chose to risk everything once again. The prison break was as cinematic as it was audacious. Surveillance footage showed the man scaling a shed in the prison yard, inching across a rooftop, and vaulting over an electric fence with makeshift rope, all under the nose of unsuspecting guards. His escape kicked off a 40-day manhunt, during which Chinese authorities issued rewards and flooded cities with wanted posters. Citizens were urged to report any sightings, and a massive deployment of security forces scoured nearby regions. Yet for all his cunning and endurance, the fugitive's freedom was fleeting. After over a month on the run, he was captured in a nearby province, hungry, exhausted, and cornered. Number 5. Ghost Airport. Pyongyang Sunan International Airport is North Korea's primary gateway to the outside world, at least on paper. Gleaming with polished floors, modern architecture, and pristine check-in counters, it looks almost like any other mid-sized international airport. But appearances here are deceptive. Step inside, and an uncanny stillness greets you. No bustling travelers, no long queues, no background chatter, and no palpable sense of movement. The airport's emptiness isn't due to inefficiency or a temporary lull in operations. You see, in North Korea, ordinary people aren't allowed to travel abroad. There are no vacations to Thailand, no business trips to China, and no reunions with relatives in the South. Passports are only issued to the politically privileged, and even then, international travel is strictly monitored. So the average North Korean has no practical use for an airport. To them, it is an inaccessible symbol of a world they are not allowed to see. Instead, the airport serves a very narrow demographic: foreign diplomats, state-approved tourists, and a handful of regime elites. Air Koryo, the country's only airline, operates a mere trickle of flights, mostly short hops to cities like Beijing or Vladivostok, and even those run sporadically. The airport is less a transportation hub and more a controlled stage. Number 4. Overseas assassination. On February 13, 2017, a cold and calculated execution unfolded in broad daylight at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The victim was Kim Jong-nam, the estranged half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and once considered a possible heir to their father Kim Jong-il's dynastic rule. Exiled and living under the radar for years, Kim Jong-nam had been largely forgotten by the international media until the moment of his dramatic and very public assassination. Kim Jong-nam had spent much of his adult life overseas, moving between China, Macau, and Southeast Asia. He was known to have voiced quiet criticisms of North Korea's hereditary succession, which infuriated his younger half-brother. This, paired with his perceived ties to Chinese intelligence and his status as a potential rival, made him a lingering threat to the Kim regime's grip on power. The attack was chilling in its simplicity and ruthlessness. As he stood in the departures area, waiting for a flight to Macau, 2 young women approached him from opposite directions. In mere seconds, they pressed their hands against his face, delivering a dose of VX nerve agent. Initially confused and distressed, Kim Jong-nam stumbled toward airport officials, gasping that he had been attacked and that something had been smeared on his face. He collapsed shortly afterward, dying in an ambulance en route to the hospital, his heart failing before doctors could intervene. From start to finish, the assassination took less than 30 minutes. Following this, the 2 women, one Indonesian and the other Vietnamese, claimed they had been duped into believing they were participating in a prank show. Surveillance footage revealed them laughing with handlers after rehearsing similar mock pranks in the days prior. Number 3. Smuggling food. In North Korea, where hunger is a daily struggle for millions, smuggling is a desperate necessity for survival. The stark reality is that vast swaths of the population face chronic food shortages, with official rations barely enough to sustain life, let alone provide nutrition. The government's control over resources and distribution leaves ordinary citizens scrambling for any means to feed themselves and their families. In a chilling glimpse into this underground lifeline, footage shows two individuals crossing the frozen, perilous border from China back into North Korea, carrying bundles of food desperately needed on the other side. Their journey is fraught with risk, as the border is heavily guarded, and crossing without authorization is a capital offense. To gain passage, they resort to bribing guards. Every step is calculated. After crossing, they carefully cover their footprints in the snow with a jacket, attempting to erase evidence and avoid detection by patrols. Smuggling, though risky, is a lifeline for the North Koreans. Number 2. Detainees abused and tortured. Former detainees who managed to escape the country describe a dystopian network of detention centers where guilt is presumed and punishment is both merciless and arbitrary. These are not simply facilities for punishing actual crimes, but instruments of terror and control designed to break bodies and erase resistance. Survivors recount horrifying experiences of being arrested without cause, subjected to beatings with iron rods, deprived of food until they were forced to eat insects or rodents, and confined in cells so cramped they couldn't stretch their legs for days. Women have shared traumatic stories of being forced to undergo abortions or endure violence while under constant surveillance. Detainees are routinely denied access to legal counsel or trials. Instead, they are interrogated for hours or days under extreme physical and psychological stress, often with the goal of extracting confessions, true or false, for the sake of record-keeping and quota fulfillment. The sheer dehumanization within these walls is systematic. Hunger is a deliberate tactic of subjugation. Those who collapse from exhaustion or starvation are left to die, their deaths dismissed as inconsequential. Children and the elderly have not been spared. Even those who end up in detention for crossing borders without permission, typically trying to flee to China in search of food, are punished as traitors and subjected to the same horrors as political prisoners. One organization at the forefront of documenting these atrocities is Korea Future, a nonprofit that has created detailed reconstructions of prison interiors and gathered testimonies from former detainees, guards, and other witnesses. Their work has cataloged more than 1,000 individual cases of torture, rape, and extrajudicial killing. Using cutting-edge 3D mapping technology, they've visually recreated the secretive world of North Korean detention sites, offering the international community an unprecedented look into a penal system designed not for justice, but for erasure. Thanks to the voices of those who escaped, the world now hears what was meant to stay buried. But wait, there's more. Number 1. Propaganda and brainwashing. In a nation where hardship is a daily reality, it might seem baffling that so many North Koreans harbor deep resentment toward the United States rather than their own government. The answer lies in the carefully constructed world of propaganda and relentless brainwashing that the regime has perfected over decades. This video offers a revealing glimpse into the machinery behind the state's psychological control. Broadcast on North Korean television, the footage paints a deliberately distorted picture of life in America, showing it as a bleak, desperate landscape where people suffer extreme poverty and despair. The scenes are chilling in their intent. Americans are depicted as homeless masses huddled next to blue body bags, drinking coffee brewed from snow, and struggling to survive in freezing tents. Ordinary details like people sleeping in sleeping bags are misrepresented as dead bodies to heighten the sense of hopelessness. This narrative is a calculated effort to vilify the United States, making it the scapegoat for all hardships, while simultaneously elevating North Korea's own regime as a protector and provider. Such propaganda serves a dual function. First, it stokes hatred toward an external enemy, diverting anger and dissatisfaction away from the government. Second, it fosters a warped sense of national pride and loyalty by portraying North Korea as a bastion of strength and resilience in a hostile world. The regime controls all media and restricts access to outside information so tightly that many citizens have never seen or heard an alternative viewpoint. This isolation traps them in a psychological bubble where distorted realities become absolute truths. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.